Good evening, Jacques. Good to see you.
Good evening, David. Good to see you again.
So it's Thursday evening. We are on X, Facebook, YouTube. And if you're joining us there, please join the comments and we can see your comments. We'll put them on screen. Now, there's lots to talk about, lots of current events. And I think, Jacques, why don't we start with Doug Ford?
Yeah. Now, he's not the only one to blame here, right?
Okay.
Certainly, from the beginning, and it's a recurring theme in terms of the general attitude of the Liberals in Ottawa. I've mentioned this many times. They are self-righteous people who've appropriated for themselves the moral high ground, and they look upon anyone who has a different viewpoint as being, the usual slurs, right? Racist or xenophobes or the usual list. But the problem with that type of attitude, when you think that you're always in the right, that somehow other people are morally bankrupt, leads to behavior that is. And actually, before I go on here, so I'm going to talk about trade. I just want to remind people that the Libertarian government does believe in free trade. And I mean free trade, not managed trade. Our trade agreements would be a single line. We have an open market, open border. If you got something to sell that people in Canada want to buy, that's it. Nothing complicated, nothing managed, okay? But having said that, if you're trying to get an agreement with somebody that you know does not take criticism well, somebody who, not that there's a lot of people who take that well, but we know that Trump is fickle. He changes his mind. He seems to be maybe having a thinner skin than most people. There
or just less patience for diplomacy.
Yes, right. But I've never been a fan in general of negotiating or criticizing in public. Like in my professional life, or I see this in the sports world, when a coach, dresses down a player in public. I just don't think that's the way it should be done. So here, trying to embarrass people, like I'm not a diplomat, but it seems to me that's the wrong way to go about doing things. And of course, Trump says, well, it wasn't just me. I was in the room when I watched it with Carney and his aide.
Ford says that, not Trump.
Sorry, Ford, yes. And they approved it, and of course, Carney now has neither confirmed nor denied, so we don't know. I suspect he saw it, but he just doesn't want to. All of this is to say that to me, that all of this is amateur hour. We need diplomacy. Why don't you let the diplomats, people who've been trained, to do this behind the scenes, as opposed to trying to get something done by embarrassing other people. The constant criticism of Trump, and it doesn't matter whether you think the criticism is warranted or not, but public criticism on the part of the Liberal, do you really think, like I would say to those people, do you really think it's actually going to pay off? Like, it just seems to me that's highly unlikely to work, right? He's going to sit there and say, oh my goodness, the Canadians don't like me, so the way he talks about Freeland and what a pain she was, and in fact, I think he might have, if I recall, told Carney, like, don't include her in her team because it's going to be a short conversation. Again, if you think you're going to manage anything by pissing off, the people you're trying to negotiate with, anyway, to me, it's just amateur hour. So that's my comment on Ford and the Liberals.
Yeah, and just for posterity's sake, if someone's watching this from the future and looking back and wondering what we're talking about, it's that Doug Ford was recently in the headlines because he created this advertisement, this TV commercial with Ronald Reagan speaking about tariffs, and then funded, to the tune of something like $75 million to play this television commercial in the United States. Like I just don't know which country on this earth would allow this kind of propaganda. Like, he's trying to propagandize the American public. I just don't know that he thought that would work out well for anyone. This follows him like pouring the Crown Royal out of the bottle on the podium, taking all the alcohol, U.S. alcohol off the shelves of the LCBO. Like, there's a series of things that Doug Ford is doing that have nothing good to do with negotiation. It's like these antics on the during press conferences, and I don't know that he has the maturity greater than like a 14-year-old. Like he's acting out of anger or sort of spite, and he thinks that these antics are going to bode well. Clearly, they're not working.
No, and I think it's an apt description. But that's what I mean by amateur, right? Or childish, or like there's nothing that resonates here where you're saying, boy, these are real pros who know what they're doing.
Yeah. I just want, more than anything, I suppose, I'd be much happier if our country was managed by smarter people. But I don't see much evidence that Canada has been managed well. Not that, I don't know that I would manage even any better, but
but I know that as a libertarian, you wouldn't attempt to, and that's the world of difference.
Okay, that's a big part of it. That's right. So, like, I don't think I would intervene in the way that Doug Ford has intervened, and he's largely in the way. So, anything more to say about that, Doug Ford? I like what you point out here, that Mark Carney is sort of avoiding these questions. He's avoiding the truth about whether he was aware of this television commercial before it aired. If we're to believe Doug Ford, then yeah, Mark Carney was fully aware of it and supportive of it. And yeah, I'd love to criticize Trump more, but Trump isn't the guy running the country that I pay taxes to. Mark Carney is, and Doug Ford is the premier of the largest province. And so, like, I think I can stand on good ground and make criticisms of the people trying to lead the country that I live in.
Oh yeah, and I think it's fair to say that Trump is dead wrong on tariffs. I mean, first of all, he's misleading his own people by saying all the time that the tariffs are going to get paid by somebody other than the consumer, which is nonsense. But again, as you say, we didn't vote for him. We just have to deal with this. But I think back channels again. I mean, I know for a fact that many governors, state governors, the ones that where their constituency does a lot of business with Canada, I mean, they have his ears on this, right? Because they're saying, boy, our people are going to get hurt here, right? Let them do that work. And maybe we can help them, but again, through back channels, not public slurring of the guy.
Yeah, it was a bad move, and the consequences financially for all Canadians, I think, is it can't be overstated. So, not sure what more to say on that. Could we move to big news about Bill Gates?
Yes.
So let me play a clip, and you maybe introduce it.
Yeah. No. Well, it's a major reversal on this part. I mean, he's gone from being a climate alarmist to actually, I believe, using the word thrive, which is pretty shocking.
So James Melville has shared a video from the Free Press. Let's watch a little bit of the video, and then we can react to it as we go. So please tune in, everybody. Let me know that you can hear the audio.
Bill Gates has finally admitted that climate doomerism is a mistake after years of saying stuff like this.
The world emits over 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases. And as we keep doing that, the consequences for human life will be catastrophic. And time is running out.
Bill Gates now says this: climate change will not lead to humanity's demise. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. Climate realists like Judith Curry.
Let's just stop there. I think that captures what you were saying. And, what was your first thought when you became aware of this news?
My first thought was, I wonder if he's finally been reading beyond Lomborg. Like, for people who don't know about Bjorn, he's a Danish. I don't know if he's a journalist or has a science degree, but he started an institute where he brought in people who are experts in their field, like economists, scientists, professors, like people in the educational field, because he made the point that would resonate very well with Austrian economists who are always repeating, truthfully, that we live in the world of scarcity, right? We don't have enough of time, we don't have enough of material, we don't have enough money, we don't have, all of that stuff. And as a result, it is absolutely essential that we allocate these scarce resources in the most efficient way possible. And Lomborg has made the point that this is his belief system, right? That anthropogenic climate change is an issue. We have to keep an eye on it. But he said there are much, much better ways to spend the enormous amounts of money right now and we're going to touch upon that in a minute. But like, for example, he said it would only require a few hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate malaria, right? With the absolute huge benefits to children and what have you. And he's been, banging that drum for a long time. And so, I don't want to go on too long about this, but to answer your first question was like, I wonder if Gates has finally read him to recognize that this idea that we're all doomed is nonsense. We have the ability to adapt.
There's another great book, not just Longborn, but Michael Schellenberger, who longtime environmentalist, longtime advocate of a kind of green agenda, but he wrote a book called Apocalypse Never, where he says that the environmental alarmism hurts us all. It was a great book, and I just recommend everyone should read it. Basically, he highlights the fact that the so-called consensus among scientists at the United Nations, in the IPCC reports, is presented politically as a consensus that there will be major damage to the planet in the near future, in the foreseeable future. But then when he actually spoke with the publishers of those specific research papers and calls them on the phone and he asks them, like, did you come to this conclusion or did you make this assertion? They say, no, that wasn't the conclusion of our paper. We never concluded that there would be a mass extinction event. Or it was just that we modeled what would happen if the CO2 or we did this or we did that. And they back away from this idea that there will be a mass extinction event. There will be no climate apocalypse. That was the message of that book. And I read it just as a way of countering some of the rhetoric that you're hearing online about extinction event and stuff like that.
But David, it's even worse than that, because people are not aware that the very first working group at the IPCC was entirely made up of scientists. And if you read their report, there was no alarmism in it. It was working group number 2, which was made up of politicians and NGOs that bastardized the first report and started to include things that the scientists were not saying, right? So it goes to show you what a corrupt organization it is. Now, having said that, some of the scientific groups are doing good work, because another thing the IPCC has done is having a group that has set up it's called detection and attribution. The first one is to detect whether there are changes in the frequency or the intensity of, extreme weather events. Vast majority of the time, there's no statistical evidence that there's any change at all, right? So when people reading the news or looking on TV and of course have this emotional response, they are saying things that the stats do not support. So that's number one. And in the few instances where there is a change, or the likelihood, because these are statistical probability statements, then the question is, well, can we actually attribute these to greenhouse gases emitted by men? And of course, you can imagine that that's difficult to do. And in some cases, flooding being an example, they have actually said it is attributable to man, but it has nothing to do with CO2. It has to do with agricultural practices, where tiling of fields, for example, can feed water in waterways much faster than it used to be, right? So this is an instance of agricultural practice that can lead to more flooding, but again, people would be pointing in the wrong direction. So, yeah.
So what do you think the future is with Bill Gates having taken this shift? His rhetoric has shifted. We can speculate as to why that is the case, but will this have an impact?
Well, first of all, it'd be interesting to see whether he becomes a pariah in these circles. I mean, they tend to eat each other, right? With no forgiveness whatsoever, right? Like, oh my goodness, you're a turncoat, and
he's the funder of a lot of those.
Well, exactly,
people.
Right? So I'm hoping that he's going to exercise his influence and help people come to his view. Mind you, I mean, he's not the only one. I mean, there are other people saying, you know what, I've actually read the IPCC report, and there doesn't seem to be any changes in the vast majority of extreme events. So
I think, I'm skeptical about Mr. Gates' motives. Let's say maybe he's just reading the room and realizing that the alarmism, that kind of rhetoric is increasingly showing to be the uninformed radical. That's the rhetoric of the uninformed radical. And maybe he just realized that he was increasingly being seen as a nut job. And so he's backing away from that, and he's showing that, okay, we can be pragmatic, and we need to approach this more practically. And good. If that has a net positive effect and stops our governments from just absolutely throwing money at nonsense, that would be to our benefit. Let's look at some of that nonsense. You were talking about this document, and I'll put it up on screen, and you can introduce it, perhaps.
Right. So this is, I believe, the latest study out of the Fraser Institute. Yeah, $158 billion to create 68,000 so-called clean jobs since 2014. And I haven't had a chance to do anything other than really scan this very quickly, but I think most of that has not materialized. So we're looking more or less at $150 billion completely wasted. And if you'll permit me to go on my battle horse again, what upsets me more than anything else is that the people who engage in this with our money will not pay a price. I keep going back to this, but that is the number one reason why we have these types of boondoggles, is because people who engage in them will not go to jail or pay a massive fine for having wasted our money.
Can I just do the math? Like, I just had to do the math. $158 billion for 68,000 jobs. They could have given 68,000 people $2.3 million bucks. Yeah. They could have just done that. They could have created give $2.3 million to those 68,000 people for the same amount of money. Like, what a crazy, they could build 68,000 $2 million mansions for that money and house 68,000 Canadians with that money.
Yep.
That's a lot of money.
And sadly, not the first time.
Oh, crazy.
Something like this has happened.
And so I saw there was this debate sort of happening at Twitter. I won't get it online, or sorry, X. And because of Bill Gates' recent shift in rhetoric, there was a guy saying that, oh, now all the far right people are going to come out of the woodwork and blah, blah, blah. And I actually don't think that that's the right way to characterize the criticism of the climate alarmist. The proper criticism is not left or right. It's more just pragmatic. Like I'm of the opinion that maybe someone should have run the wind turbine experiment, the windmill experiment. That was a worthwhile experiment, but we certainly didn't need to pour billions and billions of taxpayers' dollars to create these massive wind farms, or to intervene in the market and force electrical producers to create wind farms and have some quota of wind energy on their grid versus natural gas energy or whatever. We didn't have to do any of that. The experiment was worthwhile, but the experiment's been run. They don't work very well. They're very expensive and costly. They require diesel engines to get them started. They create all kinds of havoc with the bird population. And okay, so let's learn from the results of those experiments and stop wasting money on it. That's not a left or right argument, is it? I thought that's just empiricism. You make decisions based on what is known. And as we learn information, we should change course.
I agree. Now, moreover, let me point out two of the unstated premises in what we just saw from Bill Gates, right? So, number one is that all of that, emission of carbon had no positive effect, right? Like, he only talks about what he perceives to be the negative, right? It doesn't talk about, wealth creation or any of that stuff. So that's the first premise. The second premise is that, well, people who do this clearly do this because they're mean, because don't they know that we can achieve exactly the same amount of wealth creation by other means? And that is blatantly untrue as well. So his entire conclusion is faulty because two of his starting premises are wrong.
Yeah, interesting. So what else from the Fraser Institute report? Oh, this is a good chart. Let me get that back on screen for a moment. They have a helpful graph showing annual support for the so-called green economy by Ottawa and the 4 largest provinces in billions. This is over time. So very clearly a massive increase since 2014, 2015. That's the Trudeau agenda there. I wonder, I wasn't paying attention to this in the market, but I wonder if carbon credits have lost value as a result of Bill Gates' announcement. Like, that just seems to me an entirely false economy for the trading of pollution. But I don't know much about that market. Did you notice anything?
No, but you bring up an interesting point. I mean, it's a very legitimate question to ask.
I guess I won't know that until I should look into it. So next topics, moving on. By the way, thanks for all the chats, for everyone participating in the chat. Someone commented on a clicking sound. Boxcar Philly said there's a clicking sound in the video. Not sure what that is. I don't know. Jacques, are you flipping a pen or something?
Oh, I think I might have been. Yeah, I'm not doing it anymore.
Okay, and Lamnot noticed that ESG scores, of course, are still around. Yeah, the ESG score on a stock, of a publicly traded company. That this is, again, it's just some fiction that is added. It's a political fiction added to the valuation of a publicly traded company. Is very strange, and it all comes out of that green agenda. I wanted to discuss something more closer to my own heart here. I'm in Alberta, for everyone watching, and of course the Alberta Teachers strike has come to an interesting close. They're still in negotiation as far as I know, but the government of Alberta has told all the teachers to get back to to the classroom. Now, Jacques, I don't know if you've been following this news, or our viewers may not have followed this news. Let's go quickly through some statistics. I have something ready for us here. Albeit this is a opinionated review of recent events, but accurate. ATA said, we need more teachers. Alberta's government said, okay, we'll hire 3,000 more teachers. ATA, well, we need more support. Okay, we'll hire 15,000 more support staff. We need more schools and classroom spaces. Okay, we'll build 100 plus more schools. We don't care about the money. It's all about the kids. Okay, we'll give you 12% pay raise over 4 years. Hey, you're not bargaining in good faith. Why aren't you willing to fund education? And so on. Like, this is how from an outsider perspective, just watching the news of this in our province, that's how this negotiation unfolded, with the government of Alberta basically giving concessions to virtually everything that was requested. The ATA, you just hate kids and teachers. All we wanted was a fair deal, and you ignored everything we said. Okay, get back to work. But you've ignored class complexity. Okay, we're building a class size and complexity task force that'll deal with complexity data. Like, to me, the Alberta government, by the way, the elected officials did what they needed to represent the taxpayer. We can have opinions about whether they did that well enough, but they certainly did it better than the opposition party in our province would have done. And now there's all this news about, and all these complaints about the government of Alberta invoking the notwithstanding clause. So anyway, I'd like your take on this, Jacques. Like, I can provide more information because I've watched the news pretty carefully over the past few weeks. But what's your take on what's happening in Alberta?
To me, it's the same old self-inflicted wounds by having, and I know that you have it better in Alberta than we do here in Ontario, because you do have more sort of funding, like quasi voucher system, or at least partial funding for
a portion of funding that you pay to your taxes can be directed to independent schools or charter schools, private schools. It's not a full amount per pupil, but it's a small portion.
Right. So at least you have it better than Ontario. But I will say, once again, the idea that you are going to have one large entity, in this case the government, decide that they have the truth in terms of the best way to teach students is nonsensical. The best ideas are discovered through competition. In a libertarian world, the government would not be involved at all in education. Private schools, you could have even, as exists in Tanzania, by the way, people don't know this, but most of the education in that country is provided by the private sector, and they compete with one another. And they do, last I read, a very, very good job. But I mean, one of the many problems of the system right now is that when teachers go on strike, they hold an enormous amount of power. Right? I mean, they can claim all they want that, it's all about collective bargaining and, but when the power structure is unequal, and of course, now with the government invoking the notwithstanding clause, right? I mean, that switches the other way. But all of this is absolutely self-inflicted. Get out of the way. Leave the money with the parents to decide how best, like which school. I mean, people who study this, or they'll point out that something like Montessori, has done an extremely good job, and we know the public sector doesn't work that way. I mean, again, if you study this, people will know that your traditional public school in North America works on an old Prussian system. And the education system, with the rows and highly regimented and quasi-military, was for the and they didn't make any bones about this. It was about making obedient members of society. Well, is that the best way to educate people? and again, I'm not claiming to have the solution, but I'm saying somebody out there might have a better way to teach kids. So this is, I mean, I'll tell you, I wish I could find it, but I was reading recently an aptitude test that was given to someone in 1890. I would be willing to bet that less than 5% of high school graduates these days would be able to get an 80 on that test. I mean, I was, in many ways, I was shocked to see how sophisticated it was. I'm not the only one to say this. I think educational standards have come down. People talk about grade inflation. My wife just yesterday was telling me about this class where I think 50% of the kids got an A. Well, I mean, when I went through school, 50% of the class getting an A would have been nonsensical, right?
Average.
So, I'm sorry?
Well, 50% is average.
Yeah, well, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, no, the fact that people fight to defend this is a problem. They don't want to acknowledge the problem that we're facing, and we need, once again, people to compete with one another. I mean,
Yeah.
like another thing is, like, do I know if teachers, I mean, they always complain that they're underpaid. Is it true? I don't know. But the market would sort this out in a hurry.
Yeah, the market certainly would. I was thinking carefully about how would a libertarian navigate this problem of wanting to respect the right to associate, freedom of association, and not wanting the government to intervene too much. I put some thoughts together. I don't know if you saw it, but I'd like to review it and see if maybe you would agree. I think we would generally oppose labor unions, generally, given the coercive elements such as mandatory membership. Unions infringe on personal freedoms, and they limit the autonomy and responsibility or accountability of the individual. But in the private sector, I would generally oppose using government authority to intervene. So if people want to associate, they want to be part of a collective bargaining unit in the private sector, go for it. I think that's as long as it's market driven and they can join or leave the union voluntarily. But public sector unions, this is a totally different kind of toxicity. They bargain with the same entity that grants them monopoly power, and they can, therefore, like you said, they have tremendous power. They can force the taxpayer to shoulder higher costs without market competition or voluntary consent. And so for this reason, I was of the opinion that the elected government representatives in Alberta have every reason and right, and the support of myself, even speaking as a libertarian, to use the power of the state to send the teachers back to the classroom. The public sector union is unelected. They have no accountability to the taxpayer, and therefore I wanted the taxpayer in this little battle to win. And I think the Alberta government has made the right choice in this difficult circumstance.
Well, it might be the least bad solution to a situation that should not exist.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, anybody has the right to withhold their labor if they don't like the condition. However, you should have no right whatsoever to prevent somebody who thinks that the working conditions are not so bad to better themselves. Right? I mean,
so that's the right to work point, right? People are in Alberta are starting to call for that. The public sector unions might cause this to really backfire for them. People are calling for the right to work legislation. The public sector unions have a sort of umbrella organization. I forget what it's called, but Gil McGowan he ran to be leader of the NDP party. He failed at that, but became the leader of this public sector union enterprise. He's making claims that all of the public sector unions across Alberta are going to walk out together. And I hope they do. Like, I just think that would be magnificent, so that people of Alberta realize the amount of power that they have, that the unions currently have, that they have usurped so much power that they can force even the elected government into a corner. It would be interesting to see what happens if they take that action.
Yeah, I mean, I think unions should exist. We should simply make sure that they have no coercive power at all. I mean, as Libertarian, we're opposed to any form of coercion, whether it's from unions or anybody else.
So on the topic of the notwithstanding clause, because that's all in the news, of course, I made note of Marty up north, says, just a reminder, Quebec has used the notwithstanding clause a total of 20 times. Ontario sits at 3, Saskatchewan 2, Alberta and New Brunswick both at 1. And I forget who else it was that pointed out that when Quebec uses the notwithstanding clause, it hardly makes the news. But if any other province uses the notwithstanding clause, it's a threat to our democracy and all that stuff. Have you observed that pattern?
Yes, but that is par for the course as far as Quebec is concerned. I mean, they can get away with things that any other province could not. And it's purely done for political reasons. There are too many seats in Quebec for the federal MPs to take them on.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
mhm.
maybe today, maybe next week, we should have something a little bit more on the Constitution, because I will tell you, okay, like our friend Snarky Trader says, you know, another First Nation land claim has occurred. Private property rights seem very weak. I urge people, if they can find it, the latest interview with the great Bruce Pardy.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, listening to him is absolutely frightening, because, first of all, you know, he would agree and say that even, well, I think I mentioned that last week, right? The Attorney General of BC said, oh, no, private property rights are more important than Aboriginal. And he said, absolutely not. That this person doesn't know what they're talking about. But in this interview, he was talking about how few people recognize that racism is entrenched in our Constitution, right? The so-called reverse racism, or, you know, like there's all kinds of stuff in, like, Article 35, I think, makes it absolutely clear that it's perfectly fine to start making decisions based on the color of your skin, which is a very definition of racism. I mean, again, maybe we should spend more time on that next week, but if people get a chance, Bruce Pardy, man, the guy knows his stuff, and we have a terrible, terrible constitution in this country. The notwithstanding clause should not exist. Because, again, people have to recognize that the fundamental misunderstanding on the part of many politicians who claim that if something is passed democratically by a majority of people, it makes it, you know, ethical or acceptable. And I keep saying, the people who came up with these things, like a long time ago, the idea of a constitution, understood better than today's politicians that you can have the tyranny of the majority. You know, pointing out that it's not because you get a majority of people to agree on something that it somehow transforms an act or a bill that would be fundamentally unfair or immoral into one that is now fair and moral. It doesn't work that way. And the idea was that we have to put shackles on the government to make sure that minorities are not oppressed by the majority. So
the notwithstanding clause, however, and by the way, I totally agree with you. However, as long as Section 1 exists of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause is necessary. It's a weird thing. Like, Section 1 says essentially that all these things we're going to call rights and freedoms throughout this document are actually privileges, and we can take these things away from you if the government thinks it's reasonable to do so. And then there's a positive, given that that's in the document, the notwithstanding clause has this other effect, which is that if one government is overriding or taking away our privileges, our so-called rights, and a provincial or the other level of government, provincial or federal, disagrees with that, then they can be overridden. So the notwithstanding clause provides this debate about which level of government can take away our right. And
Okay, I will grant you that point. Yeah.
if
But then
section one
should-
disappears,
Yeah.
get rid of the notwithstanding clause.
Yeah.
All on board with that. I'd love to have Bruce Party on, maybe as a guest, if he'd be willing, in our maybe a Libertarian Lens episode, and we could really dig into this.
I found his email address, and I will write him because I had the same thought.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I would
because
like
for example, I think that what's happened in Canada regarding the Aboriginal land titles in BC puts into question our own platform on the subject.
I agree.
And I think we need to learn more about that and refine what's written both in our statement of policy, but also in our platform.
In this interview that I'm referring to, he actually confirmed one of the fears I brought up last week, which is that there are young people now in BC who I think we're on the verge of buying a house, and are saying, well, who owns it, right? And
yeah, there's rumor. There was a viral video that about a guy, 50-ish years old. He said the bank won't renew my mortgage.
Yeah.
So this is affecting people in a very real way. I want to change the topic to the upcoming budget. So after the weekend, we expect that a budget will be presented in Parliament. And there are, let's hear Mr. Carney tell us what he hopes for the budget. Make sure we can hear it.
We will make generational
Can you hear it?
investments with a plan to protect our communities, our borders, our way of life. We will build a stronger economy where everyone has a chance to get ahead. And we will empower Canadians with new opportunities, better careers, and a lower cost of living.
He's reading that. He has to read that. So this is from the Liberal Party official account about the upcoming budget, and that's about as lackluster as I've ever heard any politician speak. Like, what did you say last time we spoke? That you needed some caffeine, you needed some coffee before listening to this guy?
well, I don't recall saying that, but yeah, he's not.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to bring this up is because the Conservative Party, and I don't know if they're just playing this game or if this is quite serious. But if this could be one of their smartest plays, but what's happening is Michelle Rumpel-Garner and some of the other MPs are announcing that they've called back their campaign teams. Let me get that on screen, because they expect that Carney is trying to purposely sabotage his own budget somehow. That he wants to orchestrate a series of events that will require that they go back to the polls and that they have an election. He's polling well enough right now and the NDP is weak enough right now that maybe Carney thinks that they can get a majority.
Now, I haven't seen a poll in a long time, but the last one I saw had the Conservatives ahead of the Liberals. So have things changed then?
Well, that was a bit of a bump. You might be right. I haven't paid too much attention to the polls, but it might be that the Conservative Party is getting out ahead of this issue to put the Liberal Party in an awkward place. I was thinking about this earlier. I don't quite know how to, this is a half-baked idea, so I'm not sure how to articulate it. Maybe you can follow along here and tell me if there's any sense to this. But if the Conservatives say, Carney's going to orchestrate an election, then the Liberals can't really say that the Conservatives are going to, vote no confidence and cause Canadians to go back to an election. So is this the Conservative Party showing, kind of putting the Liberal Party in the position of being the bad guy if we're going to an election?
Well, I know the Liberals have been playing games already to try to say it is incumbent upon opposition parties to explain to Canadians why they would vote against the budget. Because again, they always bring up the same idiocy, as far as I'm concerned, is that nobody wants to go to the polls again, as if it is such a massive drag on our lives, right? I mean, you have to go and take an hour out of your day. Few months
It does
from now.
cost about $500 million.
Well, yes, granted, but individually,
But we've
mean-
just spent $500 million on gender just rice in Guatemala or whatever. Like he on the same day that we're talking about this, Mark Carney's government has announced $500 million for LGBTQIA whatever activism. That's about the cost of our election.
Yep.
So we're throwing money at these nonprofit groups with no accountability whatsoever. Apparently, we have money to do that. So maybe going to the polls isn't a bad use of our dollars.
I would be very curious to see how the average Canadian out there would answer the following question. Over the last, what was the election? April? So,
Yeah.
Okay, so over the last 6 months, has Mark Carney exceeded your expectation, been on par with your expectation, or come in below your expectation? Now, for the life of me, unless you are a complete, one of those people who essentially cheers for a jersey, that is, I will vote Liberal all my life, regardless of who is leading it, regardless of their policies. Okay, April 28th, thank you. I find it difficult to imagine that there's a lot of Canadians saying, boy, that Carney, he got us a deal with the US. Well, no, he hasn't. His budget is likely to blow through deficits like we've never seen before. Okay, so this is a good comment. Someone says I had zero expectation. So but it's important, because if you have zero expectation, nobody can come in and say, well, he's performed below my expectation, right? Like it's only either on par or above.
Yeah, but we can compare his current results with his promises, and he made some big promises, and none of them have materialized. So I find that interesting. I mean, I don't know if going to another election will change anything for us. I do fear that the election machine of the Liberal Party and the foreign interference that we know is, I don't know if it's rampant, but it's certainly present, is all in favor of that party. They could call an election, orchestrate an election, and get a majority government. That would be a horrible outcome, in my opinion. Oh
well, it's a dangerous game to play on this part, because the economy is doing as difficult as it is to understand. It's actually doing worse now than it was 6 months ago, and usually people take it out on the incumbent, right? So, dangerous game. If this is true, it's dangerous, because they could lose.
So here's related news. Bank of Canada, like, speaking of the economy, and Mark Carney was the economist, and he was supposed to help the economy. We have the Bank of Canada governor saying we're in recession. he's gesturing throughout this interview about cost of delay. Like he's showing with his hands that Canada has deferred, even if we were to turn course and start climbing in terms of productivity and wealth and so on, that growth is so much delayed that Canadians are going to, as he says, Canadians must accept a lower standard of living. And as he says that, did he lower the interest rate by 25 basis points?
He did.
I don't understand that logic. So inflation is high, economy's in the tank, he lowers the rate. Why?
Well, not that I agree with any of this, okay? Like, we shouldn't have a central bank. We certainly shouldn't have a bunch of bureaucrats deciding the interest rate. The interest rate should be set by the market. But let me explain the rationale of these people.
Okay.
So first off, you have to understand that 70 to 75% of the GDP is retail consumption, which is why people freak out when the consumer disappears, right? That always the big fear that the consumer is going to disappear.
Okay.
So what do you do to goose up a GDP? You have
let people borrow more.
You have to encourage consumption, and in a lot of cases, that consumption is fueled by loans.
Credit.
Well, the lower the interest rate, the more loans are going to be taken out, and the more you can goose up your GDP, even though it's not going to do anything like long term in terms of productivity.
But has the supply of loans dramatically increased such that the price of loans should go down? Like, the demand for debt is as high as it's ever been. Canadians are in debt to the levels of debt held by Canadian households is astronomical.
Right, but like, quite frankly, these people only have, like, it's all about money printing or controlling interest rate. That's it. That's all they know. Yeah. And frankly, I don't think they understand the crucial importance of savings in an economy. Mm. Because, by the way, when interest rates are very low, you discourage savings. Mm-hmm. So it's, in the long term, it's detrimental. Maybe in the short term, you get a goose up in the GDP, which is all they care about. But I mean, central banks, look at what they've done over the last 40 years. It's
to the value of our dollar.
Well, not just that, but it's put on the brake, put on the accelerator, put on the brakes, accelerator again, up and down, increase interest rates, decrease interest rates.
Yeah. I'm responding to a comment about keeping your savings. Jacques, you're talking about the importance of savings. Mar B. Is that how? I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a Bitcoin icon, Mar B. Keep your long-term savings in Bitcoin because the CAD will continue to decline. That's true, according to this graph. Over the 5-year period, the price of Bitcoin has done some dramatic leaps. What date was it? Do you remember what month or year it was? Pierre Poilievre said that cryptocurrencies should be available to people without central bank digital currency, but cryptocurrency could be used as a hedge against inflation. Do you remember him saying that? And then he got all kinds of flack. Well, as far as I know, he said that in roughly 2023, and Bitcoin has doubled since he said that.
Yeah, well, it was pretty rich on the part of I forget which, it was a woman minister who called him out because, of course, she picked the right date, right? I mean, from the moment he had declared that, the value had gone down, and what terrible advice. Yeah. But of course, the same person never said a word about the fact that the Canadian dollar, since the creation of the Bank of Canada, has lost somewhere between 90 and 95% of its value. But that never comes up. It's very strange. Never comes up. right? But
Very
oh my
strange.
goodness, Bitcoin, what a terrible thing, because my goodness, it can go up and can go down.
Well,
Whereas,
I would bet most MPs in the Liberal Party were buying Bitcoin at that time. Bitcoin had become available through an ETF, and most of their investors were, and institutional investors were pouring money into the ETF. So as she was saying that, she knew that her investor, her financial advisor, was buying Bitcoin on her behalf. So there, I think it was just all about painting their enemy politician, the opposite side, as irresponsible with finances and stuff. But anyway, thanks for the comments, Mara B. Yeah, I knew that the B was for Bitcoin, but I don't know how you pronounce your handle. If it, what does it rhyme with? Does it rhyme with Barbie? I don't know. Jacques, you're frozen there a little bit. Your video's frozen.
yeah, you froze just a moment ago.
Oh, sorry.
A second back.
Okay, there's one last thing I want to talk about, and then I think maybe we'll say goodnight.
Yep.
And I just wanted to remind people that this wonderful lady in Alberta is in the news, and my thoughts are with her. So this is Tamara Leach, who is, of course, at home house arrest, and she has been sharing her diary, you might say. Every few days she tells people what's going on in her household. So today she was visited by her parole, or her house arrest supervisor, and subjected to this interview and asked about her childhood and her emotional health and stuff like that. And I'm just moved to think about how absolutely ridiculous it is that the taxpayer is having to fund this persecution of Tamara Leach. And I think we have better things to do with our money. I wish that she was a free woman. But there she is.
Yeah. Well, in this country, there is no greater crime to take on the government.
The party. Yep.
Yeah. It's as simple as that. It's vindictiveness.
Vindictiveness. Well, Jacques, the next time we speak, maybe we'll have a budget at hand. Maybe we'll be going to the election, going into an election. So we should generally remind people to become a member of the Libertarian Party. If you would wish to be a candidate in an upcoming election, contact us through the libertarian.ca website. And anything else to say? Last words to you?
No, I think you've just said it all.
Well, in that case, everyone, thanks for showing up. Thanks for comments and chats. And please like, share, and subscribe and tickle the algorithm and all that good stuff. And we will see you again. We haven't decided when, but it'll be in a week or two, probably. So watch for that. Good to see you again, Jacques.